If you read the news this week, you saw it. SpaceX went public. Historic listing. But there was another news. They bought a software startup called Cursor for $60 billion. One of the biggest deals in the year, a 4-year-old company, and they sold for all stock to a company who just listed. So it could as well have been a cash deal. And they sold for $60 billion. Let's rewind to how it all got started. So Cursor, the tool that almost makes it free for millions of people to build their own software products. And it just became one of the most valuable tech startups ever. And to understand how this all began with 4 friends who did all of these incredible things in 4 years, we have to rewind all the way back to 2022 in a dorm room at MIT. This was for an idea that wasn't even Cursor. Welcome to the Startup Leap. I'm Maria Rotilu, and today is just me and you. And I'm going to be talking about the story behind one of the biggest exits of the year, Cursor, and 3 things I think every founder can take from it, and how you can get the insights that made them successful and apply to your own startup as well. So it's 2022, and 4 classmates at MIT, Michael, Swali, Arvid, and Amar, start a company. Now, these are all math and computer science kids who won international Olympiads. They turned down offers from companies like Google. They didn't even finish their degrees, and they left school to build a startup. But the funny thing is, the first startup they built wasn't even Cursor. That wasn't their first idea. They actually started out building tools for mechanical engineers. So CAD design software. If I was trying to design an engineering part, I would use this software. They started doing that and it really wasn't working. And instead of forcing it, this is what they did that I wish more founders would do. They actually realized, see, it's not working. But what are we spending time on the most? And they were like, we were spending time writing code. And they were like, wait, can we make building code easier? That was the question that sparked what we all know as Cursor today. And the answer landed. And when it came, it was to build this new tool, but it wasn't mainstream at the time. Everybody wasn't building AI the way they're building AI NLP coding tools. GitHub was using a plugin, and Cursor was like, you know what? What does an AI copilot coding tool look like if it wasn't a plugin, if it was rethought from the foundations and built from the ground up? So they did the hard thing. They created an entire code editor and built it with AI at the center, not as an add-on at the center. And this wasn't easy. And remember, AI wasn't really hot then, but this is the reason they became successful. Hold on to this lesson because that's lesson 1. So it's now October 2023. They raised an $8 million pre-seed round. And the lead investor is who? OpenAI. OpenAI's own startup fund, which is a little ironic because OpenAI would later try to buy Cursor and they would say no. And then they would end up competing with them, of course, with their own coding tool. But we'll come back to that. But by late 2024, Cursor is valued at around $2.5 billion. In just 2 years, they grew incredibly. And by the middle of 2025, around $9 billion. By end of November, just 3 years later, they raised a $2.3 billion round at a $25 billion valuation. This is at the height of the AI bubble. We've talked about this. Valuations are not necessarily values of companies. They're just projections of investors' belief on the market potential. And it's not really what often the company's worth. But here's a number that's real revenue. Cursor crossed $1 billion of annual recurring revenue. And it kept climbing and climbing. And roughly they got to $3 billion by May in 2026. And they did all of this with a tiny team, just a couple of hundred people. Each of these 4 founders ended up well worth over $1 billion. But the real question is, what lesson can founders learn from this incredible story? So I'm going to share the lessons that founders can learn from this story. And I know that it's tempting to say, oh, it was right place, right time. They were privileged, AI tailwind, was a vibe coding boom. All of these are easy to say because hundreds of companies did this exact same playbook and, they didn't exactly become as successful as Cursor. So what did Cursor have that all these other companies did not have? Essentially, they have 3 things. The first one was a superior product user fit. Cursor just felt right to developers. It was fast. It understood your whole code base. It got out of your way. It had a wow factor. It was made by developers for developers. And here's what sometimes founders seem to underestimate. Users don't care if you raised money. They tweet about how your product feels. Word of mouth becomes the cheapest, most powerful tool for marketing. And that's why Cursor won, because even before the funding round, people were using the product and talking about them. Developers were singing their praises. One founder on this show actually said once that great products self-distribute. I think this is a very good example of something like that, because they built an incredible product and it ended up becoming their marketing tool. The fact that it was just so good. Now, two, they own the platform. Because they didn't build a plugin like GitHub and the rest, they weren't hostage to anyone else's infrastructure. They controlled the entire product on the platform and later even built their own coding models. So they weren't fully dependent on OpenAI, for example, or Anthropic. That's not a feature. It's defensibility. And they thought about this really early in the journey. Now, lesson 3, and this is one I want every founder to keep top of mind. There's a popular saying that says that in a gold rush, you can go dig for gold or you can sell the shovels. Right now, everyone is rushing to build AI apps, right? Cursor sold this shovel and predicted this before it became mainstream. And in this particular gold rush, this particular shovel seller sold for $60 billion. So there's an element of market into thinking about how you build. And the best people who predict the market are the people who are solving a problem that's going to become a mainstream problem soon. So in all of this, why did SpaceX buy them? Now, this story landed on June 16th. SpaceX bought them on June 16th. And they also just came off the biggest IPO in history, over $1 trillion. And they've agreed to acquire Cursor for $60 billion. The deal is expected to close later this year in 2026. And on the surface, when you see it, it's a little bit bizarre, right? What does rockets and code have to do with each other? But if you look at the way Elon Musk moves, SpaceX has already absorbed XAI Twitter. They're building data centers, energy satellites, the entire physical infrastructure for artificial intelligence. Cursor is the development layer. One of the only places anyone is making real money is from AI right now. It's thinking about artificial intelligence all the way from the plan to the prompt to the execution. And of course, Elon is not so much of a fan of OpenAI with all the debacle that happened with him and them and the non-for-profit thing. So here's a sweet little lesson hiding in how he paid. All stock. Now, when your company is worth $2 trillion like SpaceX, your shares aren't shares. They're currencies, essentially money, especially when they're public. So buying a $60 billion company by handing over shares, especially as SpaceX just went public, is as good as cash, honestly, because SpaceX shares is one of the hottest shares right now. So both sides essentially get a good bargain. And that's what a good deal is essentially, when two people feel like they've gotten a good bargain. Now, if you are a founder listening and you want to take 3 key takeaways from this, is it. 1, a pivot is not a failure. If it's not working, try another thing. Cursor started in the wrong markets and they had the honesty to move. They weren't attached to the original idea. They were attached to solving a painful problem. I see this a lot, passion blindness. Because you believe so much in a thing, you're not listening to what the market is saying. Listen to what the market is saying. 2, control your distribution if you can. Now, not everybody can do this, but try. The easy path is to be a nice little feature on somebody else's platform. But the hard path, your own surface, your own experience, your own direct access to customers, your own models, your own infrastructure is where lasting value really stays. And honestly, it's hard to do this. It's not for everyone. But in this case, it worked out beautifully. And honestly, in the best companies, you tend to see that this is one of the features that separate the companies that really do well and those that don't. And then I guess finally, in a gold rush, ask yourself honestly, am I digging or am I selling shovels? Both can work, but if you're a shovel seller, you sleep better. In some cases like this one, this shovel seller sold for $60 billion. So if you're in a market timing, figure out who you are. Know what game you're playing, essentially. Now we're getting to the end of this episode. We talked a lot on the Startup Leap about how AI has made it almost free to build a product, what that means, what does a world-class product suddenly mean. Cursor is proof that you can do both at the same time. It's the company that made building cheap for millions of people around the world using AI to code, but it's also built something so good that it became priceless. 4 friends started this company in just 2022, 4 years ago. They pivoted, and in that time, they've exited to SpaceX for $60 billion. It's not just because they build fast. Everyone builds fast right now, but because they built something superior to the market, they really, really built something great, and they also had a perfect market timing. So that's the story of Cursor. Tell me what you think about their exit. Tell me what you think about this industry. Tell me what you think about SpaceX's exit as well. See you on the next episode.
Tell us what you think of this episode on all of our platforms at the Startup Leap Pod. Do you have a question? Ask us and we'll ask our guests. Go to thestartupleap.io. See you next time.